Welcome back to Otaku no Video. As always, thank you very much for joining me. Where today I am reviewing Mobile Suit Gundam SEED, an anime series that came out in the early 2000s and which has a lot of hate directed to it. And I want to get this off my chest before we go any further. I love SEED. I'm definitely a fan of Gundam SEED. So I will talk about some of these things that fans didn't like, but you know, FYI, this is not going to be a review that rags on SEED. Now, SEED is an alternate universe series, the fourth alternate universe Gundam TV series. What's interesting about it is that while the previous series like X and Wing and G Gundam all tried to go kind of as far away as they could from Gundam while still retaining an essential Gundam quality to it, kind of asking the question of how far can you go from classic Gundam while still being Gundam. SEED takes some elements from original Gundam that are very familiar and then goes in a very different direction with those. Moreover, there are some crucial differences in the setting. Whereas in Universal Century you have normal humans and these new types who have these special powers that come to them kind of through combat and such. In SEED you have normal humans called naturals and genetically engineered humans called coordinators. They are made to be faster, stronger, and smarter than normal humans, and they're most of the people who are in space. So while Universal Century is about themes of independence and freedom and how far you can do the things that you want to do, you know, reasonably, and how much you have to sort of subordinate yourself to your society and to what you have to do, SEED is more about racism. And the question of, is it fair to be born into a world where you're competing for jobs against people who were made to be better at it than you were? And what does that mean? There's also an important storyline element where two of the main characters, who are pretty major forces on either side of the conflict, they're on different sides, but they grew up as friends. So it explores the irony of that relationship and what it means for their relationship now. Now, overall, another important thing, this was the first Gundam series that was colored and partially drawn on the computer. So previous Gundam series was entirely hand-drawn and hand-colored up until the assembly process. SEED was able to reap the rewards of that much faster process of doing a lot of things on the computer. So this means it is much flashier, much shinier than previous Gundam series, and it's a little more experimental in that sort of visual style than a lot of other Gundam series are. It just wasn't as mature of a technology. Unfortunately, this also meant that they had to figure out exactly how to budget the series. So there are some animation budget issues later on in the series, a lot of reused animation, particularly in the fight scenes. You're going to see a lot of Gundams circling each other while firing in this series. And there's a fair amount of clip show material. Fortunately, they also have learned from previous anime series, and when they do a clip show, they'll integrate that into an existing show. So maybe another character one character getting another character up to speed on past events. You'll see sort of a montage of earlier stuff, and then we'll get back to the story of that episode. So there's very little in the way of a full episode clip show. It's kind of integrated in. You know, it's one way of doing it. The direction overall, it moves at a pretty fast clip, and it's one of the things I actually like about it is that it's an uneven show, but it moves. It does move on its plot, and there are quite a few things that I expected they would hold off on until the end. It's kind of, okay, here's something that they need to, you know, pay off in the climax. They pay off on some of that stuff very early on, and then deal with the consequences of that, which is always the best way of doing a story. Indeed, overall, one of the interesting things about this relates to all that payoff and the fact that there's a lot of characters having different relationships with each other. It has a bit of a soap opera-y feel on that score. Now, certainly not nearly as bad as, say, Wing, or not nearly as much as Wing, where there's just everyone has a relationship with everyone else in Wing. SEED's it pulls back a little bit from that, but that's actually good. SEED has I think a graspable web of relationships between people, and you know, Wing can get a little muddy on that score. The relationships also change quite a bit over the course of the series. Characters, you know, like each other and dislike each other. There's a lot more of that relationship change than in most other Gundams. I can't think of any other Gundam off the top of my head where there's that much going on over the course of a show in terms of people, loving and hating and friendship and all that kind of stuff changing. And then, of course, there's this central relationship between these two characters and the irony that they're now fighting on different sides. And one thing I like is how the writers really explore that theme and what that means, and can you still be friends with somebody, and what kind of friendship is that, what kind of relationship is that, and what does that mean for how you behave in general, which is awesome. One of the things that's not so awesome is a particular character called Flay Ulster, and I'm telling you about it, or telling you about her, because a lot of folks hate Flay, and I understand. Flay can be very, very annoying. She is there for a very specific reason, though. She's there for some certain plot elements that kind of need to be there to fire off other things. And indeed, you can see that the creators kind of understood that the character wasn't working out because she doesn't show up a lot, for a large chunk of the series. She kind of fades into the background for a large chunk of the show until finally they kind of have to pay off on some things with her. So, FYI, she is annoying, but she does kind of go away after a while. And this is one of the criticisms that folks have of Gundam SEED that I actually think is a strength. The staff of series now can pay attention to how the fans are reacting to the show much more quickly than they could in the past. Before, you were making these series, and you really didn't know what people thought about them until quite a bit later. You could read about them in certain ways, but you really couldn't collect a lot of material about it. Now that we have email and the web and Facebook and Google Plus and all that kind of good stuff, you can get this feedback much more quickly. So the creators were watching this as the show's in production, and they actually changed elements of the story based on how they were seeing people reacting to the show. Now, some folks cry foul on this and say that is, for some reason, it goes against the integrity of the series. I don't understand that, because the creators weren't writing in things that folks were asking them to do. So in other words, if somebody says, you need to kill off character X, they didn't just go and kill off character X. But if a lot of fans were saying this isn't working, the staff could then go back and say, okay, how can we integrate a change in that into the story that we have planned? So a number of things shift around in the story that, is fairly clear to certain amounts that things, that wasn't planned originally. But again, I think that's a very good thing, is to be able to get feedback from folks and say, hey, this was not a good idea. This isn't working. Let's find a way to make it work. And you'll see that in a couple different ways in the series. So just FYI, that's there. Again, I don't think it's a problem, but whatever. And please don't leave a comment saying I'm wrong about this. That's not the point. This is a review. Anyway, FYI, they did that. Now, the voice acting. This is a Gundam series. Gundam tends to get, excellent voice actors, for lack of a better word. And certainly, I had no problems with the dubbing in this series, especially particularly in the Japanese. But the English dub actors do a fine job after a while. It takes them quite a while to find their feet for their characters. Most anime series, it'll take an episode or two for the voice actors to really figure out their characters. It takes a while for these guys, but that's okay. And they do get there. And there are a couple of scenes in particular that I was like, they need to hit these particular emotional points for these characters. And I listened, and sure enough, they hit those emotional points. So kudos to them. Now, as I mentioned, the story does change, does move rapidly, and there are quite a lot of changes to the story as it goes on. The writing is kind of uneven in that sense. There are some episodes that are relatively, not quite bland, but things don't move very quickly, and others where they move much more quickly. Moreover, it's not about moving quickly, it's about whether things are paying off, whether things are slow. You obviously need some time to recharge from major moments, but this feels, a lot of stuff is not quite like that. However, there are also scenes that are burned into my memory for being just shockingly effective, where just some major thing hits total payoff in this scene, and you're just riveted to see how these characters are going to deal with this thing. There's some stupendous stuff in Gundam Seed from a writing perspective, from a pure writing perspective. So kudos to them there as well. Universe overall is typical from an alternate universe Gundam series. They clearly think through their technology and their level of how things work. This certainly feels more modern than a lot of other Gundam series. And so they've just kind of leveled it up and made it a little more like what we would expect in now from the future, as opposed to in the 70s or the 80s from the future. And so all that works pretty well, but they don't go too crazy with it. There are very few things that seem ridiculous, although two important things on there. One, there are a few things that they kind of pull from original Gundam as references to original Gundam, and were kind of a little over the top in original Gundam. So that's fine because they're references back to that. Moreover, Seed does not try to be as realistic with its Gundams and with its mecha as previous Gundam series do. While it is certainly more of a real robot show than, say, Gao Gaigar or a lot of the other Super Robot series or Super Robot Wars, for example, Seed is pushing slightly more in the direction of Super Robot in the sense that the mecha moves very rapidly. They pose a little bit more than a lot of other Gundam series. Because, frankly, it is an action series. It is meant to look cool. Mecha wouldn't work the way Gundams work anyway. So, they're constantly trying to be flashier and more action-y than a lot of other Gundam series. Another thing that this series does particularly well is the music. Toshihiko Sahashi is the composer, and there's one thing he does better than almost anyone else on the planet, and that is making big, sweeping, huge music. And boy, is this the right series for that. This is just, big orchestral, Star Wars-like music. Oh, tremendous, tremendous. Perfect for the series. There's some musical scores that work really well for the show or for the movie, but you wouldn't necessarily want to listen to them, in everyday life just alone. This is certainly not one of those. This is one of the soundtracks you can just listen to. There's some silly synth pieces that are just kind of like dull, but there's a lot of music in here that I can just listen to over and over again. Just gorgeous, big instrumental, fight, duel of the fates kind of stuff. Great stuff there. So those are overall my thoughts on Gundam Seed. As I mentioned before, the comment section on this review, I expect to see people disagreeing with me. And if you disagree with me, that's fine. I will ask, though, that you not just say, well, you're wrong, because you're wrong. At least give me some reasons as to why you think the way you do. Anyway, so that's Gundam Seed. I will be reviewing other Gundam series coming up soon. And that's it for this review. So thank you for watching. If you're looking to talk about Gundam Seed and other interesting anime series, please stop by the website, otakunovideo.net, and I look forward to seeing you there. So thank you, as always, for watching. Oh. With a rag?